Good morning, and also from my end, welcome in this Conscious Consumption webinar. Glad you're joining us and hope we can offer some inspiration as to how Belgian consumers feel about sustainability, but also how their view and attitudes have been impacted by COVID-19. We promise to share actionable insights on what consumers expect from future-proof companies like yours. But before going into the content, I would like to say thank you to two of our clients who have been so kind to offer us and thus you some treats to make this webinar an even tastier experience. So thank you both, Tony Chocoloni and Unilever, for your kind gifts, much appreciated. And when I say clients, I mean they're working for us, InSites Consulting. And on the next slide, you'll see how we have been evolving over the past 22 years since we started. Today, an organization of over 500 people servicing over 300 clients from 17 different locations around the world. And even though we're covering 17 locations, we are still very present in our home market, Belgium. And on the next slide, you'll see the great bunch of brands we are working for from the Belgian office, both a nice combination of local brands as well as international brands, many tuning in for this session today. So now you know who is in this virtual room with you. I gladly pass the floor to Joeri, who will share the ins and outs of the two-part study we conducted in Belgium among 4 different generations and how each of these experience and value sustainability. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sophie, and welcome everyone on my behalf as well. I'm very happy to present you our latest results in this presentation called Conscious Consumptions. Now, what I would like to do today, it is a webinar. Normally it's a one-way communication. I'd like to make it a bit more interactive, and that's why I would love that you scan this QR code with the camera app of your iPhone, or go to the URL that you see below at this slide. But the easiest thing normally is to just scan the QR code with your mobile. And then you would go to a survey, of course, because InSites Consulting is a research agency. And the first question that you will see on the survey, you can still scan it or go to the URL on top of the screen, is how are we feeling today, to give me some response on how you are feeling. So while you're answering this first question, maybe some of you feel a bit less good, and maybe some of you even feel a bit eco-anxious, as they call it. Eco-anxiety has been described by American psychiatrists as a new form of stress, you could call it. Not immediately a mental disorder, but it's added to the catalog, as they call it, not yet to the DSM-5, the classic diagnostical and statistical manual of mental disorders, but maybe it will be in the future. So what is eco-anxiety? It's a number of people who feel stressed on the climate change. They describe symptoms such as panic attacks. They have loss of appetite, insomnia, and obsessive thinking about the planet. Some of the younger generations, like Generation Z and millennials, for instance, have eco-anxiety in an extreme form. We call them the eco-dinks, and I'm sure you all know what dinks are. It's an acronym we've been using for years and years in marketing and in targeting. So double income, no kids. Eco-dinks are those millennials and Generation Zs who are not having children because they think it's not the right thing to do, because they don't want to put children on a planet that is in this shape today, actually. So you will find blogs and vlogs like the Baby Bust blog or the Bird Strike blog, on which they are calculating what's the effect of one extra child on the planet, because many of the problems we have on the planet are, of course, related to overpopulation. And as you can see, they calculated the difference between becoming vegan, not having a car at all, only using public transport, And it's clear that having children is actually the most polluting thing you can do for the planet, which is the reason why they don't want to put extra children on the planet. Coming back to how we're feeling, I see 3 people are maybe a bit eco-anxious today. They're a bit neutrals, but luckily the majority is feeling good. I hope this will stay the same during the next hour and during my presentation. And for those feeling a bit less good, I hope you've received a bar of chocolate. It always helps to feel better in the end. So from worrying about the climate change and eco-anxiety, we saw that many, especially the younger generations, went to worrying about eco changes. And of course, the climate protests were quite a thing in 2019. About a year ago, at the end of September 2019, when there was a climate summit in New York, globally, there were 7.5 million people worldwide participating in this type of protests. So it wasn't just Greta Thunberg and young people, but many more people actually took part in this protests. And it's not just the young generation, of course, and let that be clear. That's not the only reason why we want to be involved with more conscious branding. Even the older generation, I'm sure you're familiar with Sir David Attenborough, who is 94 years old, and he's famous for his fantastic documentaries. And he has a new one and a new book also, Life on Our Planet, which is the reason why he started an Instagram account at the age of 94 last week, actually. And in less than one day, he had 1 million followers. Today he has 5.4 million followers as a 94-year-old. So he's still influencing how people think about our planet. His Blue Planet 2 on BBC was one of the reasons why there were so many protests in the UK about using virgin plastics in production as well. So yes, we want to make the world greater again. The only thing that we could wonder, and I think Sophie already mentioned it, is, but yeah, there is COVID. Since the end of 2019, after the climate protests, where are the climate protests today? There are still protests going on if they're allowed, but maybe instead of making the world greater again, we want to make the world more fun again, with restaurants and bars and nightclubs closed and lockdowns, or maybe we want to make the world more safe again, rather than more green again or more greater again. So often I've been asked this question, is clean the new green? Because in the beginning we certainly saw people being anxious about getting infected by the virus and avoiding bulk products in supermarket, for instance, buying apples that are wrapped in plastic again. And of course, we're using detergents and chemicals to sanitize our homes and our hands. So that's why we thought at InSites Consulting, let's rerun our study. We did the first wave of the conscious consumption study in July 2019. Then COVID happened and we wanted to see at the end of August 2020, so it's quite recent, do we notice any changes because of the coronavirus? Are people thinking in a different way? And one of the conclusions, the most important conclusion, is actually that the urgency and the importance of sustainability has not decreased because of the coronavirus. The opposite is true. And actually, I will present the Belgian results today because this is a Belgian event. We are also doing the second wave in other countries in the coming months. But I already saw studies from the US where they have the same results. So even in the US, where they're also hit hard with the virus, we see that consumers still think sustainability is a key issue. And you see that it even went up after COVID. We also asked in this research, is climate change, is it as important to you or as serious as COVID-19? And you see that almost 7 out of 10 Belgian consumers at the end of August 2020, in the start of the second wave, said it is as serious as COVID-19. And actually it is. If we look at the Earth Overshoot Day, which is the day on which we have used up all the planet's resources, and we look back 30, 50 years, we see that this day, it comes earlier every year, which means we are destructing our planet, to summarize it. And even though we had UN definitions of sustainability for the first time in the 80s, in 1987, and the triple bottom line model of CSR in 1994, I will come back to that later on. Since those dates, the Earth Overshoot Day became earlier every year. 2020 is still missing, as you can see. Of course, we already know what the Earth Overshoot Day is this year. And as you can see, but the dates are not correct. So August 22 should be in 2019 and July 29 should be in 2020. We practically almost gained a month thanks to the lockdowns, you could say. So, which means that now after Earth Overshoot Day, there's still 35.8% of the year remaining in which we are destructing the planet. So we shouldn't be too happy about this, because worldwide we still need 1.6 planets to cater for all the food and all the needs we have. And if everyone would live like a Belgium, by the way, our own National Earth Overshoot Day was on April 5 already, we would need 3.84 planets to cater for all the needs of Belgians. Now, coming back to this triple bottom line model, it's the classical model of sustainability. And it says, what is sustainability? It is still going for profits while doing also better for people and doing better for the planet and also better for your profit. So on 3 levels, it's the 3 Ps: people, planet, and profit. This model was constructed by John Elkington, which is a world famous CSR and sustainability expert, 26 years ago. Now, himself, John Elkington, actually recalled his own model last year at the 25th anniversary of his thought leadership model. He said, I was wrong. And that's quite unusual, because mostly recalling models, it's something that car manufacturers do when the brake is not working, and then it's really needed to recall a model. But a thought leader saying, for 25 years, my model was wrong, that's quite exceptional. And what he said is, my model actually gave an alibi to companies to not invest in sustainability when it's not profitable. So this triple bottom line, it was the wrong thing to say, and it's not the way forward, because in the end, it leads to Earth Overshoot Days that come earlier and earlier. So you could say he kind of announced the death of the triple bottom model. Now, luckily, John Elkington himself is still alive, and he wrote a new book, which is maybe the PR reason why he said my old model is not working anymore. This new book is called Green Swans, and I'm sure you've heard about the black swans during the coronavirus. And he published this year, where he puts the emphasis on the fact that sustainability should not be about doing less harm, but it should be about becoming regenerative, which means that we have to restore and replenish what we have lost, what we have destructed. So it goes a step further than just doing less harm for the planet. And it means we are to rethink our systems. We are to rethink the way we produce products, the way we organize our businesses, but also the way consumers are living, and also how competitors are working together. So the open source thinking of sharing innovations and insights, or working together on innovations. There are some examples, like for instance in the US, Coca-Cola is working together with the 2 biggest competitors, PepsiCo and Keurig Dr. Pepper, to improve the recycling schemes and to get more plastic bottles back so that they can recycle them and use them as rPET in their production. So it's 3 competitors working together to solve an issue. There's also initiatives like Loop. It's a combination of TerraCycle, specialist in recycling, UPS, the delivery service, and 25 multinationals, all competitors, includes Procter & Gamble, Nestle, Mars, etc. And they're creating durable containers, durable packaging that is then picked up by UPS, washed and used again, instead of disposable plastic packaging. This was a test project last year, for instance, in France with Carrefour, and in the UK with Tesco, but in 2020 they want to roll it out in many more countries. So it's multinationals working together. As mentioned before, doing less harm is not enough. We should create climate plus commerce, which means we are adding things to the planet again. And on this website, it's an interesting website called Net Positive Projects. You will find examples of companies that are committed to adding something to the planet rather than taking resources from the planet. So which companies are on there? There's Levi's, for instance. Levi's has been investing in using less water in producing jeans for years. They have the waterless jeans. There's also HP, and there's Dell. Dell is the biggest recycler of e-waste. They have recycling programs in over 80 countries. They use recycled ocean plastics to create the shells of your laptop. And they also use bamboo instead of cardboard for the packaging when they send the Dell computer to you or when they ship it. So net positive projects like Dell, HP, Levi's are a good example of climate plus thinking. A bit closer to us is Kalundborg. Kalundborg is a business park in Denmark where 9 different industries, 9 different companies are working together in a circular system, as you can see, which means they're using each other's waste, they're using each other's excess energy to really make it carbon negative instead of carbon neutral. So really climate plus thinking again, which also means, what about our byproducts in manufacturing? We should get rid of our byproducts, not by wasting them, but by actually reusing them, recycling them. And there's great examples of big multinationals already doing that. For instance, in the beer industry, you have Heineken, but also Carlsberg, who are using the byproducts of the brewing process to create biogas or biofuel that they're actually using as energy to manufacture, to brew the beer for you. I also mentioned that consumers have to change. Of course, that's needed. Consumer behavior has to change. This is an example also of how living in a different way has an impact on the planet. It's an example coming from the Netherlands. The regen villages are built today in Almere, about half an hour commute of Utrecht. And these are 200 homes, as you can see, that are self-sustaining in energy. They have solar panels, but also self-sustaining in terms of food. They're growing their own vegetables. They have their own fish. They're even using their food waste to feed to the fish to actually have a circular village as well, with CO2 neutral emissions or no emissions at all. If you live there, you're not allowed to drive, of course, a fossil fuel or diesel car. You have to drive an electric car as well. So summarizing this first chapter up till now, we talked about the triple bottom line model, which for 25 years was the key sustainability model. Well, the inventor of it actually said it's dead. We need to go to climate plus. But what does sustainability mean for Belgian consumers? And that's actually the next question you will find. If you're logged in a bit late, you can still scan this QR code or go to the URL you see on top of the slide, and then you will get this question. If you want to answer this question, please use one word, because a word cloud, it's more easy to analyze if you just use one word. If you think of consumers, how they understand a concept, which is a vague concept perhaps to them, like sustainability, how would they subscribe sustainability consumers? So not you, but consumers in one word. One of the things that we can learn from this slide, and I don't want to influence your answers, that sustainability is a very complex matter. And it's a holistic concept in the eyes of consumers, which means that they're often confused. They see different labels like organic or free from, natural, bio, or they also see this is responsibly sourced, but they also see this is made in a fair trade way. And often they don't really know the difference between these different concepts. It also means that in their head, as it's one holistic concept, if they see something organic like bio vegetables and they see them packaged in plastics, which to them plastics, it means not good for the planet, then it doesn't make sense. It makes them eco-anxious, because in their heads, something organic should also be made, packaged in a sustainable way. Same thing if you use fair trade as a claim. What we often see with consumers is that think because it's fair trade, it's also produced in an environmental responsible way, and it's also good for the health. It's also organic, which isn't necessarily the case, as those are three different things. Better for yourself, better for your health, better for the planet, and better for people, or the social governance, you could say, of companies. Let's have a look at the results in the word cloud. They're probably still coming in. I see people adding words like it's anti-plastics, plastics, pesticides. So that's the health side, no chemicals added. It's eco-friendly, responsibility, impact on the environment. Local, I also see as one of the things you mention as customer or consumer associations with sustainability. So it's a mix also in your head, and that's really the case. It is a holistic concept, and for many consumers, it's quite hard to understand what it really means. And you see, responsible becomes bigger in the word cloud, so more people are posting responsibility as an important association with sustainability, being correct, being responsible. So thanks for joining us in this poll. If you logged in late, you can still join the poll by scanning the QR code you see on the screen, or by going to the URL on top of the screen. Local also became more important, so responsibility and local are the top answers in your open-ended question for the moment. Now, the whole frame of better for the planet, better for me, and better for them, it was quite a complex slide. So to illustrate it with an example, which has a category which has already proven to be crucial to Belgian and global consumers, toilet paper. I have a great example coming from Australia. It's a toilet paper brand called Who Gives a Crap, a premium toilet paper brand that is using a DTC, direct to consumer business model. And as you can see on their website, they are also claiming the three aspects of sustainability. But the most important one to them, which is really a differentiator, is the one in the middle. Because good for your bum, which means it's healthy. We don't use any chemicals, inks, dyes, or scents. But it's not the only toilet paper brand that's doing that, and even good for the world, using recycled paper, taking care of the rainforest, being B Corp certified. It's probably not the only brand doing this, but it's actually the first brand of which I saw that they're donating 50% of all the profits directly to charities that are building toilets for people who don't have access to toilets, as apparently globally there's more people that have access to a mobile phone than to a clean toilet. So of course it makes sense as a toilet paper brand, premium toilet paper brand, to use this good for people, so the social dimension, as a differentiator for competitors, while the other two, we could call them defensive shield. So actually, as a brand, in branding and marketing, you could say, we can use certain claims, better for me, better for the planet, but also better for people, social goals, as a defensive shield, which means often that in your industry it became the new norm, or the best practice, or we can use it as a differentiator from our competitor, which means we're going a bit further. We're actually using it to bring in more business. Both strategies are important, and what we see with scholars in academic papers is that it's really the differentiating points that leads to a better valuation of the company and a long-term better financial performance. We asked Belgians in different generations, when you think of a sustainable brand, which brands are top of mind? Now, and you can see it in big red letters on top of the slides. The main conclusions are that different generations are not always very aware of which brand is sustainable, even in 2020. And with more than 1/3 of baby boomers not knowing one sustainable brand at all, or at least not sharing it with us in our open-ended question. If we compare that to the youngest generation, you can also see it on the slide, they share many more brands, so they're more aware of sustainability, and they also share different brands. You immediately see that some logos who became a brand themselves, or retailers like Oxfam and Fairtrade are top of mind of the older generations, while the younger generation has other brands in mind, and one of them I hope you're enjoying for the moment is Tony's Chocolonely, which in the chocolate industry actually created a competitive advantage of becoming slave-free, so working on the fair trade aspect, the social aspect, and was a disruptor in the market, you could say, or at least they brought something new into the chocolate market. So differentiator from competition, and if we look at Nielsen figures, because I know you like facts and figures, you can see that the total chocolate market is still growing, and I think even with the coronavirus, we still need our snacks. So it's a growing market, but those brands that are doing sustainability claims, whether it's environmental or fair trade like Tony Chocolonely, those brands are growing much faster than the ones that are not using any sustainability claim at all. I would like to move to the next question in our poll, and this question is about fashion. And if you look at two fashion brands or sports brands, Gucci on one hand and Adidas on the other hand, the question is actually, which of those two brands do you think are or is the most sustainable brand? So on one hand, there's a more sportive brand. On the other hand, there's a very luxury brand. And what we see in the sports brand, but again, I don't want to influence your answer, is brands like Nike, for instance, who recently are also gaining more competitive advantage with investing in sustainability, not only in the production, in the supply chain, which they have been doing for a while, but also in creating a different type of products. So Nike is on a mission called Move to Zero, which summarized its zero carbon footprint, but also zero waste. And they created these shoes that are made of at least 50% recycled material, of which 75% is factory scrap. So reusing what they normally would waste in their factories, they're reusing it in new collections. This is the Nike Vapor Max Flyknit 2020, which is 50% made from recycled materials. And whenever you see the windmill on the package of Nike, it means this product is at least made from 50% recycled materials. There's also a QR code on the box of shoes. And if you scan the QR code, you will see that with virtual reality or augmented reality, you suddenly see a wood popping up and a distribution center popping up of Nike. And then you can click on different parts on your shoebox, actually at your own home in augmented reality. And they give you an explanation on, for instance, the European Logistics Center, what they're doing with bioenergy, hydro energy, solar energy, to actually decrease the CO2 emissions and waste. So whenever you buy a Nike pair of Nike, you scan the box and you get the latest update on their sustainability strategy. Let's have a look on your votes, and the majority said Adidas, while the minority thinks it's Gucci. And Adidas, of course, has been communicating a lot about working together with Parley for the oceans, using ocean plastics to create recycled shoes. They sold 1 million in 2017 already, and they were aiming for 11 million recycled plastic, ocean plastic shoes. But the right answer to the question was, of course, Gucci. Gucci is more sustainable at the moment than Adidas, which to many of you would be a surprise. But if I look back to this slide, the answer was already there. Think back of the very eco-conscious Gen Z consumers. They mentioned Gucci as number 3 in the top of mind sustainable brand. And often they're not even the target group of Gucci, but they read about Gucci and they know that associations like the Global Knights, who make a yearly top 100 of most sustainable companies, that within the fashion industry, actually Kering, which is the luxury group above Gucci, is still the number 1. They lost some spaces. They're now on 23 in the total global 100, but they're the number 1 in the fashion industry. H&M is number 2, which was also mentioned by millennials. And then Adidas is actually number 3, but you can see that Adidas, because of the things they did with Parley, they are gaining in the ranking of most sustainable company within the industry. Now, what is Kering doing? Kering for 10 years has been measuring an EPNL. EPNL stands for Environmental Profit and Loss, and it measures carbon emissions, water consumption, pollution, the use of land, and also the waste production in the entire supply chain. So going back to the first suppliers of the products they're creating. They're also quite active in using less leather and no fur, etc. So Gucci as an example of more sustainable production. Coming back to how Belgian consumers are thinking about sustainability, we of course asked them also in a spontaneous question, what is sustainability to you? A bit like we just asked yourself. And we see the results here. The golden bars are the 2020 post-COVID results, you could say. The green ones are the 2019. We see that the reduction of CO2 emissions became the number 1, which used to be the number 2. Recycling programs are still important, and everything that has to do with plastics, which is even more important for Generation Z, is the number 3 in the global, in the Belgian total population. Reducing food waste, it was a new one in this spontaneous associations as well. So these are clearly influenced by what happened during the coronavirus. And for instance, people living in cities with the lockdown, they experienced a more clean air and they became aware that there is actually an effect of traffic on their own comfort when they live in cities. What we also saw, and we actually asked it in our study as well, is people started to revalue nature, because the only thing they were allowed to do was walking, hiking, cycling in nature. So the importance of clean air actually gained because of the coronavirus. Food waste, we also saw that many people wanted to limit the shopping occasions because there were queues outside of the supermarket and grocery stores, or because they wanted to limit the risk to get infected in the beginning. So by reducing the number of times they went to a shop, they were more aware of what do I still have in my fridge and what are the expiry dates. So that's why reducing food waste became more important because of the coronavirus crisis. But again, the CO2 emission and clean air, it became more important. And we already see brands that are tackling these issues. This is Ford, for instance, which is using a new geofencing app for their vans. which automatically detects sensitive areas, which means when the Ford van, a hybrid van, is entering a low emission zone, it will push the car to driving electrically. So you as a driver, you cannot influence it anymore, unless the battery is not charged, of course, but it pushes into driving electrically because it's better for the environment and better for the direct environment. It even recognizes school areas as sensitive areas. Also in fast-moving consumer goods, we know that there's challengers like Oatly, which is in plant-based dairy, and they've always been using this claim that if you switch from cow milk to oat milk, you're saving 73% in CO2 emissions, and they're even putting their own carbon footprint, climate footprint on their packaging, and actually stimulating the food industry. This is our number per package. Show us your numbers, because of course they know it's a competitive advantage if you would compare it to cow milk, but it's making it more transparent what the CO2 emission is in the production of milk. These are the first carbon neutral bananas who were launched in Europe, and they were launched by Dell. They're carbon neutral because Dell is offsetting, which means buying certificates, planting trees to decrease the carbon footprint of growing bananas, and also, of course, transporting them to Belgium. But also in other industries, like in the mobile industry, we see brands like Belong in Australia, for instance. It's a mobile telco provider who created this tool in which you can calculate your own thumbprint, they call it, not footprint, because it's on a mobile phone, to see how you're doing in terms of carbon emission. And then you get the results personally, your personal results, 62.7 kilograms with all the data you're using. And they say if you switch to us, we are carbon neutral telco provider. So they're using it again as a competitive advantage in the markets. And then even in the financial industry, we have Doconomy in Sweden working together with MasterCard, and they created this black card. Normally you already from Doconomy get your monthly MasterCard statements that are not just saying, okay, you spent so much money on these products and services, but they also mention the CO2 footprint using the famous Nordic Holland index. And instead of giving promotions on certain advertisers, you could call it, they are giving you tips on how you can buy products that have less carbon footprint. The black card even has a limit, as you can see on the slide, of carbon limits. So not a financial limit, but the minute you've reached your monthly carbon emission limit, you won't be able to use this specific MasterCard anymore. So it's really for the eco-conscious consumer in the Nordics. On this slide, we also saw that recycling programs are important. And I think Nestle with Nespresso is a good example. They have the aluminium coffee capsules. And the big challenge in that is you want people to recycle, to bring back the capsules. So they make it easy. They send you a bag in which you can recycle it. They have collection points. But to educate people to do that, they're also doing something with the recycled capsules. And you see this example here is one of the 1,000 limited edition bikes made from the Arpeggio coffee capsules that you could win if you participate in the program. But they've also introduced this pen with Caran d'Ache, which is also made of one Arpeggio capsule. So it's a nice thing to have, and they're using this in contests to educate people on the importance of recycling, but also to show what they're doing with the recycled capsules. Of course, the main thing is to reuse recycled capsules and aluminium, but also trying to gamify it for the consumer. Plastics and packaging, as mentioned before, it still is an enemy for consumers. So it's also the reason why the gateway of consumption, the retailers, are removing as much plastic as they can from their store. And of course, if you're working in an FMCG company, retailers are your most important stakeholder, apart from consumers, of course, and investors. So it means that if you invest in sustainability, you will get more shelf space with retailers, which is one of the benefits of investing in sustainability. Another example comes also from Nestlé. It's the Institute of Packaging Science that they've launched last year. They have 50 researchers working permanently on developing eco-environmental packaging and getting rid of the plastics in their packaging. And in less than 1 year, they already introduced paper packaging for 3 of their main brands. So they show they're really committed to getting rid of this plastics. So summing up this first part, we talked about triple bottom line and Climate Plus. What does sustainability mean to Belgian consumers? It's a holistic concept. CO2 emissions and recycling and plastics and packaging are the top three important topics for them. And as a brand, you have 2 different strategies. It's either a defensive shield, which means it's the norm in your industry. It's the best practice when it comes to sustainability, or it's a differentiator. And we saw some examples of both strategies. The question we can ask ourselves is, okay, there's so many different aspects of sustainability. Which one should we choose? Should we do everything, or should we just go for social, or go more for the planet, or more for healthy and ingredients? And it's a difficult question. And of course, it depends on your industry, but it also depends on the consumer. So let's have a look at what is a consumer thinking? What is this sustainable mindset? And one positive thing is that in our research, we see that more than 6 out of 10 Belgians want to change their own habits to have a positive impact on the environment. And it's even higher with women and with next gen, which is a combination of millennials and Generation Z. Some other facts, we asked them, do you think you are living sustainable? For the moment, about half of Belgian consumers think or feel themselves self-reported that they are. Only 16% says I'm not living in a sustainable way, which means there's a lot of neutrals. So sometimes we're not sure we're living sustainably. Another thing, an important thing, is that 7 out of 10 says I'm willing to pay more for a sustainable alternative. And we also asked how much are they willing to pay more. The sweet spot is between 15 and 20% more. But on the same hand, 3/4 state in another question, we should not have to pay more. It's actually, we are not the creators of the problem. Companies are the creators of the problem. They're manufacturing it. So why should we as consumers pay more? So that's, of course, still a challenge for many brands to make it cost efficient, to have the right margins, and to make it scalable. Now, the next question you will see on Poll Everywhere, and you can still go to polllev.com/Joeri, Joeri, if you want to participate, if you're logged in late. This will be your next question. Which of the following habits do you think are the most popular to consumers? Is it using up leftovers at home, limiting their water usage, or refusing plastic bags? So vote now and we'll see your results later. Again, not wanting to influence you, but we already talked about the plastic demon. It's really an enemy, you could say. We see many companies like Coca-Cola, for instance, investing in recycling, but also in using recycled plastics. This is an example from Sweden, where at the start of this year, they could state that they are in Sweden locally producing their soft drinks in 100% rPET, 100% recycled plastics. And they announced later in the same year, from October, also Norway and the Netherlands will have 100% rPET. When it comes to the small bottles, when it comes to the big bottles, they're announcing that by 2021, they also will be reduced to 100% with rPETs. Another example comes from the fast service restaurant industry. Burger King in the UK had a meltdown campaign, What they did is they, like many fast service restaurants, they have children menus, and inside the children menu you find a toy, and the toy is often made in plastic. So they pledged in 2019, we are removing plastic toys from the children menu box because it uses plastics. And if you still have these toys from older boxes, you can bring them to your Burger King. We will collect them and we will melt them and upcycle them to children playgrounds in our restaurant chain. So that's another example of how plastics are the new enemy. And if I look at your results, which probably are still coming in, we see that the majority of viewers of the audience says 8 out of 10 refusing plastic bags is the most conscious consumer habit or the most used habit among Belgian consumers. Number 2 is using up leftovers, and on the third place, only 4% thinks it's limiting water at home. Now, when we look at the results, you see that they're quite different. It's the other way around, you could say, because the number one habit is, and it even increased, using up leftovers. And I think I already mentioned it a bit earlier in the presentation that reducing food waste became more important during the lockdown. So that was a hint. Limiting water usage at home also increased with 10%. We had some dry summers and a lot of communication in the Belgian press about the fact that we have a shortage of water. And then refusing plastic bags is actually, of the 3 options, the third one. Although we see that it really also grew during the lockdown, which often we thought wouldn't be the case. We thought because of Corona, we are using more plastic, like plastic gloves, face masks, but also will you bring your reusable bag inside the supermarket, or do you want a single-use plastic bag? What we see here is that we have a serious increase in the number of people who say, I don't want to have that plastic bag anymore, often because you have to pay for it in the meantime. So more than 70% is refusing plastic bags. But leftovers, food waste is a more important habit for Belgian consumers, and limiting water usage as well. This is an example coming from Procter & Gamble from South Africa, actually, where in 2018 they had the first water shortage crisis, and it influenced them, it inspired them to come up with an innovation that is waterless. Like you have the waterless Levi's jeans, you also have waterless personal care products from Procter & Gamble, first launched in Cape Town, but clearly addressing a need that becomes more globally important. Also mentioned here in the graph, and it's a new one, we didn't ask that in July 2019, is I don't buy water in plastic bottles anymore, which is a bit below 50% of the 15 to 70-year-olds that don't want to buy water in plastic bottles anymore. And then we have this innovation, you could say, an innovation project of Unilever Belgium, who is creating flavored water, not in plastic bottles. And I hope you're trying it out at home. This one's Be Better Water, a Belgian initiative. It's boxed in plant-based packaging, which has 66% less CO2 emissions than plastic bottles. And as you can see on our website, they're saying not perfect, but better. And if you read a bit closer, it mentions whenever you have the choice to drink water from a bottle, box, or tap, always choose the tap. And of course, why can Unilever say this? It's a competitive advantage. They're not bottling plain water, but they have this flavored water. So the next sentence is actually, sometimes you want something else than tap water. You want something more flavorful, nutritious, and healthy. And then there's Be Better Water as the option that is better for the planet, but also better for you than soft drinks, you could say. What we also saw in this graph is mending clothes, repairing and consuming less in general. They also increased during the lockdown. Again, trying to avoid more store visits, but also the economic effect of a crisis, you could say, where people, first, the shops were not open, but they also try to consume less because they're not secure about their future. Some of them temporarily lost their work or are a bit concerned about their finances. So repairing becomes more important, and it was already a trend going on, like many sustainability trends before the COVID crisis, that actually accelerated because of the COVID crisis. So H&M, for instance, before COVID-19 already had concept stores in which they have repair stations where you can go back with your t-shirt or your pants and ask them to repair it rather than throw it away and buy something new. And of course, the re-commerce market, buying second-hand, buying vintage, becomes more important in the fashion industry, and is growing much, much faster in the last years, even before COVID, than traditional fashion retail, which means that even luxury brands have to invest in the re-commerce idea. Renting clothes, for instance, Rent to Runway is another example of a billion valued company where you only rent a nice dress to go to a party and then you deliver it back. But also in the car industry, you have this sister company of Volvo called Link & Co, offering rental vehicles. There's Kipling even. I wasn't aware before I created this story, but you can rent Kipling luggage instead of buying it, because sometimes you only need it to go on a holiday. And also IKEA, which is of course also on a mission to become zero carbon emission, is testing furniture rental as a business model in 30 countries at this very moment. Another sustainable habit we see in our research is eating less meat. And again, you can see that it increased after the coronavirus. Not sure there's a link, although you could say perhaps if people think of the bat and the Chinese food market, it may have an effect on people becoming flexitarians or vegan or vegetarian. It increased, but again, it was a trend going on before the coronavirus. Because of course, eating meat, it has an effect on animal welfare, but it also has an effect on other sustainability concerns, for instance, water usage. And we saw already big change, like McDonald's working together with the Beyond Burger, Burger King working together with the Impossible Burger. And so it led to an increase in sales. So Burger King, for instance, they started with one Impossible Whopper, and then they introduced other vegetarian burgers because they saw it attracted a new audience. And it's often not driven by vegans or vegetarians, but by flexitarians, people who want to avoid meat for a certain period for their own health, but also for the planet. You have initiatives like Veganuary, for instance, January, not eating meat for a month in Belgium. We have the 40 days without meat, which is more linked to a classic Catholic period around just before Easter. And it has an impact. It has an impact on the planet, as you can see on this slide, on the CO2 emissions, but especially also on the usage of water. So all these plant-based alternatives, they're not just launched there because of the vegans and vegetarians, but because of the reducitarians, people who want to reduce not only waste and sugar, have a more healthy lifestyle, but also want to reduce the intake of meat as flexitarians. And we have plant-based, but we also have lab-grown meat that is redefining actually the whole meat category, and will have an impact on the industry. Literally redefining Israel, but also Nova Meat in Spain, lab-grown, 3D printed meat that looks exactly like a real meat in the end, but it's much better for the planet. And then another example from the fashion industry is ASOS, an online and e-tailer who is not selling fur, feather, bone, silk, mohair, cashmere, and angora anymore, As I know, their customers become more eco-conscious and they have many next-gen customers. And even the Queen is not wearing any real fur anymore. So if the Queen is not doing it, why should other consumers do it? Then at the bottom of this slide and of these graphs, you can see that paying to offset CO2 of flights, not so many people are willing to do it. It didn't change during the COVID crisis. We're not flying anymore, but it's less than 30%. So there are still some limits to becoming more sustainable. This one might be solved already by a spin-off of UTH in Zurich called Synhelion, and they just signed a contract together with Lufthansa to develop fuel that's actually made of CO2, water, and sunshine. And it's renewable energy that can be used in airplanes. Today, it's too expensive to use it, and I think the industry has other challenges for the moment. But it's clear that in a couple of years, your flight will not have a negative impact on the climate anymore, which is good because the main enemy of sustainability is still the convenience. And we actually asked, do you remember, there was half of Belgians who said, I'm not living sustainably. We asked them, what should brands do to make you live more sustainable? So what are actually the barriers? And you see the percentages. The number one is actually affordability. They have the impression that sustainable alternatives are often more expensive than non-sustainable alternatives, so make it more affordable. Accessibility, it's not easy to get hold of sustainable options. Education, I don't know which brands are sustainable and I don't know how to live more sustainable. Rewarding me, where is the benefit for me, and also making it very convenient and easy. Some examples from brands. This is a Unilever example again on affordability. As you can see, the eco refills, they're using less plastics, 75% less plastics as the normal bottle. You refill it yourself at home. It's made from 100% recyclable and recycled plastics. And because it's smaller, it saves a lot of trucks on the road as well. But it's cheaper. So for the consumer, there's also this immediate benefit. Then accessibility. It's hard to get sustainable options. Beauty Kitchen announced these refill stations across the UK, not just in grocery stores, but also on university campuses, in train stations, in beauty salons, in major big office complexes. You can refill your Beauty Kitchen personal care products everywhere around you. It makes it more accessible. And of course, the Too Good To Go app, which is a nice initiative, getting rid of food waste. It's convenient because in the app you see, okay, I'm feeling hungry. I want to have some bread or whatever food you're into. You look near you with your app, who is offering you what on a cheaper price because it's surplus food. The store is almost closing and they have some surplus food, so they're giving discounts on the food, and then you're saving the food from getting thrown away. So it's convenience and ease for the customer. It's also rewarding because they get a discount, and it's better for the planet in the end. Another example of reminding and rewarding is what public transport in Italy is doing. They have these recycling machines. It's a reversed vending machine. So you throw in a plastic bottle in the vending machine, and then you get credits on your transport card. So you can take the metro, the tube for free if you recycle enough plastics. Reminding and rewarding. And the last thing is education. This brand, it's called Stop the Water While Using Me. It has been around for 9 years, since 2011. They're using less water. They are reusable, recyclable packaging, and the brand itself actually communicates that you should stop running the tap while you're using the brand. So they're educating their customers as well. It was bought, by the way, in 2020 by Beiersdorf, being as being a startup and now is part of the Beiersdorf multinational. So the second part of the presentation, we talked about a more conscious consumer. We talked about, they have a positive mindset. They want to change their own habits. But if you look at their habits, it's often the ones that are the most easy, the most convenient, that they're still doing. So convenience is the main enemy of sustainability when it comes to consumer behavior, which leads to buying behavior and so also an effect on your business. And responsible consumption, it's often not only what you do, but also how you are communicating it to consumers, which means we should keep educating consumers, keep reminding consumers how they can live more sustainable by offering affordable, accessible, easy and rewarding products. And then we come to the last part of this presentation before we dive into the Q&A. And this is called Good Business is Good Business. Often I still have questions on, but Joeri, but sustainability R&D projects, they cost a lot of investments, cost a lot of money. We're not sure that the consumer will want to pay extra for it. So is it viable? Should we really do it? And it comes back to the triple bottom line model that's still in our head because we were brainwashed for 25 years. It should lead to better profits. But there's other ways, apart from leading to better profits, that I will prove you, that also have an effect on your company performance with different stakeholders. One of the stakeholders is, of course, the consumer, which is important when you're a market research agency. And what we see in the results from Belgium is that 1/3 of Belgian consumers say sustainable brands have a higher quality. So the minute you're doing something sustainable, 1/3 will say this is better quality than another brand. It also means 2/3 is not seeing sustainable as of a higher quality. You know, with statistics, you need to be careful. But at least they find sustainable brands to be more up to date. 6 out of 10 consumers agreed, and it's an increase with 11% compared to 1 year ago before the corona crisis. Now, if we look into academic publications on sustainability, this one is very interesting. It's from the London Business School. What they've done is they've compared 2 types of companies and controlled for all variables except for a difference in ESG, environmental social governance strategies. The high ESG companies in the early 90s applied at least 40% of ESG policies that were defined by the researchers. So it could be social, better for the planet, and better for myself. Low ESG companies had applied 10%, maximum 10% of the ESG policies. For the rest, those were identical twins when it comes to market share, industry, etc. So they really controlled for intervening variables to see what is the effect of applying a more sustainable strategy in the long term, because they compared the data set of 18 years of both type of companies. They had 180 companies, 19 high ESG, 90 low ESG. Now what you see when it comes to shareholder value on this slide is that if you invested $1 in a high ESG company, it led to 22.6, almost $23 in after 18 years. And when it comes to low ESG company, more profit maximizing companies, it led to a shareholder value that was a bit lower. Now this is only shareholder value, but also looked in operational financial results, and they've proven that high ESG companies outperformed low ESG companies in 11 of the 18 years that they looked into the data. So there is a clear financial advantage of investing in sustainability, and it's often related to different stakeholders. It's related to the consumer who becomes more loyal. It's also related to your human capital, because you will be able to attract better talent, which leads to better results if you invest in social goals, but also in environmental goals. And it's also, of course, related to other shareholders, like investors who increasingly want to invest in ESG companies rather than more risky low ESG companies. But coming back to branding, when you look at the benefits of sustainable branding, that's related to different stakeholders, there's 4 different benefits. And the first one is all related to creating more brand awareness and more preference. I'm not sure if you're aware of these hashtags. They were quite popular on Instagram. It's Vloekskam and Tagstort, popular, as you can hear from my accent, in Sweden. And it actually, Vloekskam hashtag was used when someone was taking a plane for a short distance flight, and then they were tagged with hashtag Vloekskam. Or when someone was taking a train for a long distance, it was tagged with Tagstort, which is the opposite of Vloekskam. It's bragging about, hey, I'm on a train, I'm not flying. And both hashtags became popular in Sweden. It actually led to more Swedes switching to trains, not because of Greta Thunberg, but also because of this trending hashtag on Instagram. In 1.5 years, twice as many Swedes took a train from Göteborg to Stockholm or the other way around instead of a plane. This is inspiring also for companies like the Deutsche Bahn, the NMBS of Germany, you could say, that did this Facebook advertising campaign in which they were looking specifically for profiles that are involved with traveling a lot. And then they posted Facebook ads comparing typical touristic pictures in different regions outside of Germany with pictures that resemble the same touristic pictures inside of Germany, and also comparing the costs for the consumer. For instance, you see here the Tower Bridge in London, but to travel from Munich to London by plane, it costs you 200 euros, and the footprint. When you go by train to Berlin, you almost have the same picture, a bit different, as the Tower Bridge, as a staycation, you could say. Again, this was before the coronavirus. They also did it with Venice, costing you 486 euros, or Hamburg, costing you 19 euros. You don't have gondolas yet in Hamburg, but you have the same feeling almost. Even becomes more obvious when you look at this hanging bridge in Vancouver and compare it to Hunsrück in Germany, or Arizona in the US, costing a lot of money and CO2 emissions. Compare that to Rhineland in Germany. Now, this campaign on Facebook was very successful for the German rail. It led to a click-through rate that they had never seen before on their ads, and it also led to more sales of train tickets, 24% increase in revenue. The second benefit is working on your image, brand image, and having your license to operate. So this is another stakeholder often. It's citizens, it's NGOs. So if we don't communicate about sustainability and what we're doing for the planet, there's other parties like, for instance, Greenpeace, which is very active, in this case, reacting to Barbie and Mattel brand on using cardboard in their packaging, for which they had to cut trees in the rainforest. But also an example from Belgium, Head & Shoulders, Procter & Gamble brand, which is using palm oil or was using palm oil. And it uses the imagery of the brand and also the USP of the brand. Head & Shoulders wipes out dandruff, but it's also wiping out the rainforest. And this is Greenpeace activists in Brussels, in Strombeek, where the local Belgian Procter & Gamble headquarters is based. Third benefit is creating relevant innovations. And relevant means it's an innovation for which consumers are willing to pay for, or why they're willing to switch to a different brand. It can also be a reason to develop new and emerging markets that you haven't addressed yet. Great example from Unilever is Lifebuoy. Lifebuoy was actually created as a soap brand for emerging and developing markets. It's an affordable, low-cost soap brand with the intention, social intention, to have more kids washing their hands and staying alive in the end. And so global hand washing programs. But it also led to an innovation for Lifebuoy. They created this soap that when you use it, it's white, but when you use it for 10 seconds, after 10 seconds, it turns to green. So it's a gamified experience because they want more children to use soap and to wash their hands. So it's a quite clever innovation, color changing soap based on the idea we want more kids to sanitize their hands, because in emerging markets it's important for their health, and today it's important all around the globe. It works better than singing happy birthday to yourself when it's not your birthday. So innovations, yes, and then of course employees as a stakeholder as well. We all know that both millennials and next gen, so also Generation Z, they want to see their values reflected in the employer they want to work for. And we know from previous publications on millennials at work, for instance, that 6 out of 10 millennials are mainly choosing their employer based on the purpose of the employer. Am I doing meaningful work? What is the employer doing for the environment and for social goals, for diversity, for inclusivity? It becomes more important. Even for big tech players, which also saw the protests, for instance, 8,702 Amazon employees that were sending an open letter to the CEO of Amazon to ask Amazon to do more for the climate, because they're such a powerful organization. This is 8,700 of your employees writing you a letter, do something about this. And during the climate protests, Google workers walked out along with Amazon and Microsoft employees to go on a climate strike in big tech companies. So it's clear that you also have to do it for these stakeholders, your own employees. What we know from our study is that if you don't communicate actively about sustainability, people don't know you're sustainable. It's even the contrary. If you don't communicate actively, 7 out of 10 consumers say, well, you're not sustainable. That's what we see in the results. And when we asked Belgians, for instance, we had a list of 100 global brands. They were shown 25 randomly, and then they had to pick maximum 5 brands of the list of 25 they saw randomly to indicate these are the most sustainable brands. The top result was actually 40% of Gen Pop, the general population in Belgium, didn't select any of the 25 brands. So they said, none of these brands is sustainable to me. And again, you see an age effect. The older the respondent, the less brands they were indicating. These were the top results, and you can see that Alpro was the winner in Belgium. Alpro is plant-based, of course, but apart from this being plant-based, they also have a philosophy called One Planet Thinking. So they're also for years investing in energy efficiency, biodiversity, working together with WWF and IUCN and communicating about this. If you're not communicate, you're not sustainable. And then I want to end with 4 rules for communicating on sustainability. The first one is talk about your long-term commitment. Because what we see often is that companies are not communicating about sustainability because they have this reflection. We only communicate about things when it's done. We only communicate about acquiring a new company when the contract is signed. We only communicate about our quarterly results when we're sure that we have these quarterly results. Now for sustainability, it's never done, of course. It's a work in progress. And of course you have KPIs and goals that are 2030, even 2050, which doesn't mean you cannot communicate about your plans and your long-term commitments. So when you do that at once, but also do it in a non-boring way, which is the second problem, and I will come back to that later on in communicating on sustainability. So Volvo, for instance, has this Volvos Are Rubbish campaign, which is clearly not boring if you call your own products rubbish, but it gets your attention, and then they explain that by 2025, not today, but by 2025, 25% of your Volvo car will use at least 25% of recycled plastics in the interior. Carlsberg has Together Towards Zero and has so many different goals they state here with different deadlines, 2030, 2022, but communicate about the commitment, make it clear KPIs. As you can see, they're even using the imagery of the SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals that were defined by the UN. Then the second rule is whenever you have something new, when you have achieved something, do communicate and do celebrate on what you have achieved. And a good example is what Heineken did this year. Heineken has been working on using renewable energy since 2010, for instance, by using electric-driven trucks in cities. And this year they achieved a certain milestone, which was that they can actually brew all the brands, not just the Heineken brand, but all the brands in their portfolio in the Netherlands completely on green energy. And so they communicated about this in an out-of-home billboard campaign, saying it's our newest ingredient of Heineken, 100% green energy. So do communicate and celebrate what you have achieved. Always be transparent and open about commercial motives, because often sustainability, it leads to cutting costs. If you use less energy, it means you have less costs, so it's better for the profits. Again, if you have less waste, you have less costs, so it's also good for your EBITDA. But be transparent about your goals. And Unilever has been proven that they're very transparent. They're communicating continuously about the fact that their sustainable living brands are outperforming the other brands and actually delivering 75% of the company's growth. Why? Because it leads to talkability, it increases penetration, it builds customer loyalty, and it reduces price elasticity. And I just say, this is also one of the reasons why we're doing it, because we want to increase our value, our stakeholder value, and not only create a better planet. So it's end in the end. This is this means my time is up, so I have to hurry up a bit, and I have to, stop my clock. It doesn't want to stop. Perfect presentation, right? Okay. So trust in a post-greenwash age is important. What we see in the study with Belgians is that only 4 out of 10, 43%, are trusting brands that make a sustainable claim. And it's the same as pre-COVID-19, which means that there is still 57% who is not automatically trusting you when you say you're sustainable. So becoming more transparent, it's important, and also consumers say it in our research. Brands should be more transparent, provide extra information. This has increased compared to pre-COVID, as you can see. And this is the last time that I will ask your feedback on this online survey. So again, if you logged in late, you can still scan the QR code with your CAM app or go to the URL polf.com/Joeri on top of the screen to give your opinion on which ingredients or labels do consumers check the most on grocery packaging. So what are they checking groceries on their packaging? Transparency becomes more important. It's also the reason why clean labels become more important. And this is an example of Heinz in Brazil changing their brand distinctive assets, which is the label of the ketchup bottle, by showing the ingredients on front of the package instead of the backside of the package. In general, consumers are tracking and tracing what they're eating and drinking and buying. The only problem, and that's the reason why they ask for more clear and reliable sources, is that there's more than 463 different eco-labels used today globally. So it's confusing for the consumer who wants to do flip side shopping. It's a trend, like we're immediately controlling the backside of the packaging to see what's inside. Are there any unknown terms? Are there any chemicals inside? So as you can see, they're demanding, this is the Belgian results again, demanding for certifications and reliable ways to evaluate a brand sustainability. And this also increased after the COVID crisis. Yuka is an app with which you can scan the barcodes of products, and then you can immediately see on different aspects, is this product performing poor or excellent in terms of ingredients, packaging, etc. Let's have a look at your results, what you think is checked the most on grocery packaging. I can see that carbs is not being voted for yet. but calories is the number one, sugar is the number two for the moment, and the provenance of the product, where it comes from, is a number two. Let's have number three. So let's have a look at the results. Number one was sugar, number two was calories, and number three is provenance. But clearly sugar still being the most checked item on the packaging, which is the reason why confectionery brands are redefining or innovating in creating their brands with less sugar and lower calories, because the consumer is more concerned about that. It can also lead to consumers that are less satisfied, like Cocoa Pops, for instance. Kellogg's brand introduced Cocoa Pops with 30% less sugar, and they announced on their socials it's just as delicious, it has less sugar, but Sammy here, for instance, on Twitter tweeted, "Lies, my morning Cocoa Pops are ruined." So sometimes we need to check whether consumers also think it's a good idea for your brand. Apart from calories and sugar, the provenance of products becomes increasingly important. We know that with the Corona crisis, local or terroirism, the local provenance, we went more to local stores, to local farmers because of solidarity, but also because we believe it's more healthy, which has an effect on companies as well. Campina, for instance, if you go to the Belgian Campina website, Friesland Campina, you will see that they stress this milk comes from Belgian cows. When you go to the Dutch website, you will see the Dutch family Van Poppel explaining their Dutch cows producing milk for Friesland Campina. And it's not only valid in food and beverage and in fresh produce, even in energy you can see this claim of being local and transparent as something that can differentiate you from competition. This is an example from Van den Bron, from the source in the Netherlands, which shows on their website where your energy comes from. It's green energy. You see the story about a family that has surplus energy, and you buy your energy from a family that you actually know, and that is local on the website. And then the last point, it's about keeping your brand's tone of voice. Too often I see that when companies start to communicate about sustainability, it's the PR department taking over, it's the CEO taking over, and marketeers are not involved anymore, which is confusing. It's confusing for your employees because it communicates internally, oh, this is a different tone of voice, so it's a PR campaign. And also for the consumers who often don't even see your campaign because it does not relate to the brand and the type of brand communication that they have in mind. So of course, communicating on LinkedIn, which we're all doing about our fantastic sustainability actions, that's good because we want to attract next-gen employees, and LinkedIn is a good medium, a good channel for that. But in the end, we also want to address mainstream consumers with our sustainability plan. And we can only do it by keeping the same media channels, keeping the same tone of voice. And the last example is Corona, not the virus, but the beer brand of the ABI group. They have been involved with cleaning beaches because Corona, it's all about summer, beach, surfing. So cleaning the beaches together collectively. They have introduced cans in which they played with their brand distinctive acid, lowered the blue, which stands for the sea, in Mexico, regionally where beaches are more polluted. And it led to 30% more participants in cleaning the beaches. And they also introduced these stackable beer cans, getting rid of the plastics that they normally use in 6-packs by allowing customers just to stack the cans up till 10 cans instead of 6 cans. So it also leads to more volume. And I made it open source. They shared it with other brands as well. And last but not least, they are doing these music festivals, not during COVID lockdown, but hopefully afterwards. They will do these music festivals again, which is all about having fun together for young people. They address 350,000 youngsters around the world. This is a South Africa example, with a festival that's about DJs, but also about eco-awareness. It's the most sustainable festival. They clean up the beach afterwards collectively, and there's eco-warriors giving workshops on the state of the planet. So summing up this last part, good business is good business. I think I proved that investing in ESG leads to better financial performance in the short term and in the long term stakeholder value, but it also leads to better benefits for your brand. Not communicating about sustainability is also communication. It says you're not sustainable, and there's 4 rules when you want to communicate about sustainability. So don't just do it for Greta, of course, you have to do it for your business performance and becoming future-proof as well. We went a bit over time. I hope you liked the content. Do send me your feedback on email or on LinkedIn,